Chapter 28. Jaren Calavan. Rachel and Jaren stepped into the small cafe. There was no sign on the street, and they'd passed it twice before noticing the small stencil on the door. "I think that's him." Rachel motioned to a man in the corner, sitting on the edge of a stool at a tall table. He wore a long trench coat, large and heavy, and a large-brimmed hat that was pulled down to shade his face. There were two people in line, and the guy taking their order. Jaren took a step back toward the door. He didn't know what this guy was going to tell them about his dad's company, but he knew it wasn't going to be good. He wasn't sure he was ready for more disappointment, but if he wanted to find out why XC Energy had shut down, why his dad had told him not to come, and what he could do to show his dad he was worthy of a place beside him, he had to go through with this. He told himself to move, but it was like there was a brick wall in front of him. Rachel broke the wall by pulling him forward. They stood across the table from the man. There was no movement, and for a moment, Jaren thought maybe the man had fallen asleep. Then the hat tilted, exposing pale, washed-out eyes. The guy was as old as a dinosaur. "Jaren Calavan, I've wanted to meet you. At least one of us has a name." Jaren didn't see another stool, so he leaned forward, elbows on the tall table. "You must be Rachel," the man said. "You've been asking dangerous questions. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "Yes. I'm not going to be intimidated if there's a truth that needs to be told." "I wasn't talking about her name." Jaren pressed his palms flat against the table. "Who are you? How do we know you aren't the one making this dangerous?" The man's eyes studied Jaren, and he felt like a little kid in front of his dad again. "You can call me Vox. The only way you can know I'm not the one making things dangerous is that you've already met them, and they came with that tattoo." Vox tilted his head and exposed a neck. Loose skin, but clear. No tattoo. Jaren remembered the neck tattoo of the men who had chased down his car. "That doesn't mean you aren't dangerous," Jaren said. "Spoken like a true Calavan," Vox responded, a cold smile painting his lips. "Always weighing the risks. People close to me have been hurt in the past. I can't say I'm not dangerous. What I'm asking you is how bad do you want to know?" The ache rose inside him, the hunger that made him chase down every ball, the desire that pushed him harder and faster and was never enough. He met Rachel's eyes, and she nodded. "We want to know everything," Jaren said. Vox cleared his throat and leaned forward. XC Energy was funded by a society known among some circles as the Triune. They are untouchable, untraceable, except for their contributions to companies that provide power, technology, and information. There are dozens of companies all over the world that create a great front, but underneath, they only release partial truths. I started researching the Triune when XC Energy was first created. "What did you find out?" Rachel asked. "I was only able to discover that XC Energy provided power that shouldn't exist. They couldn't explain where it was coming from, and no one was asking questions. No permit, no safety inspections, just a dead-end trail of engineering reports that didn't make sense." "Why didn't you report them? Dig deeper." Vox lowered his head, the hat covering his eyes again. Jaren could barely hear the words. "I was a coward. I cut my losses and ran." "Why?" Jaren asked. "They came to my house the day after I ran my first story in the LA Times. They tracked down all my sources. Anyone who gave me leads, tips, information. They sat me down, sticky sweet and professional, and told me to drop the story." "You were a journalist." Rachel leaned in, sucking up his story like soda through a straw. "I was an investigative reporter, but the meaning of the word has changed. We dug deep and found the truth when people still cared about the truth. Now there is so much empty entertainment out there, people don't even want to know how to find the truth. Most people don't even want it. It's easier to have instant access to millions of useless bites of information than to accept one grain of truth into your soul." Maybe this guy was a nutcase, an embittered crackpot. "Did you agree to stop the story?" Rachel asked. "Hell no," Vox said, his head snapping back up. "I told those boys they were welcome to borrow my fire poker and stick it where the sun doesn't shine." "And then?" Vox showed agitation for the first time. He tried to rub his hands together to cover the shaking as he searched the restaurant from beneath his hat. "I was a family man, had the sweetest wife, 3 boys, just like their dad, and a little one on the way. We were having a girl." He paused to take a breath, and Jaren wondered if his dad had feelings as deep as Vox. Was there excitement when Xander Calivan found out he was having a son? "I'll never forget the way the tall visitor touched my wife's hair on the way out the door. He reached out and took a handful with his filthy hands. He smelled it like some perfume strip out of a magazine. Then he looked at me, his face empty, lifeless, that black tattoo sticking out on his neck like a brand on a cow. He smiled." An involuntary shiver ran through Vox. "I've never seen a look like that. Like an animal right before it feasts." He pulled a card from his pocket and flipped it across the room. Vox paused now, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He moved them under the table to place them on his knees. What was on the card? Rachel gripped the table like she was pulling back against the string that was trying to pull her right into Vox's story. That black triangle with 3 points and the edges that never quite seem to touch, the lines getting lost as they twist their way into the center. That same symbol on your father's gate, the same symbol on the necks of the men who chased you. How did you know? I know more than any man should. Vox took a drink from the cup that had been sitting on the table in front of him. The cup wobbled, his hands unsteady. The card was a warning? Rachel asked. A promise. My wife and unborn baby girl were killed the next day, burned to death when their car caught fire in a rollover accident. My 2 older boys were taken less than a week later. The oldest drowned in a local swimming pool. The other was caught in the crossfire of a drive-by shooting. Vox leaned forward as if the memory of his family weighed him down with physical pain. I was there. Each time they made sure I was there to watch, helpless to save them. That's awful, Rachel said, one hand to her mouth. Jaren wanted to turn away, feeling sick, but he'd found himself lost in the old man's eyes. They left that damned symbol as a mark, each time, so there would be no doubt it was them. When they moved the remains of the burnt car, the black, twisted triangle was scorched into the ground. Beneath the body of my oldest, in the concrete soaked with water, the triangle stayed dry. Vox fell silent, the emotion causing his voice to crack at the last word. And the other? Rachel pressed softly. Formed with my son's own blood, on the street. You had 3 boys? Jaren asked. What happened to the last one? They left me the youngest. Not out of mercy, but as insurance, leverage, to force me to keep my mouth shut. And it worked. I had to, for my son's sake. I took him and ran. Disappeared for the last 20 years. Where is he now? Rachel asked. He was taken a year ago. Natural causes. Now it's just me. There's nothing left they can take. Are you saying my dad did those terrible things so he could be rich? Jaren wanted to take Vox's water and swallow the terrible taste in his mouth. Xander was a pawn, an ambitious man with the right skills, motivations, and connections. He knew what was happening to keep his company clear, but he ignored it. I don't know if I'll ever forgive him for that. But I was running short on allies, and some of the things Xander had been doing, well, I took a chance. What are you saying? Jaren asked. Before the shutdown, Xander agreed to help me. Get me information about the Triune. See if there was a way to stop them. Jaren shifted his weight to his other foot. He wiped the table like he could clean off a stain that wasn't there. He was helping you? Your father isn't the same man that started XC Energy. Something changed him, for the better, but that was before the shutdown. I haven't been able to get in touch with him since Sunday. Since the accident, Rachel said. Vox checked his watch. We only have a few more minutes. They've been following me. He reached into the oversized overcoat and pulled out a manila envelope. This is all Xander was able to get out to me. He said he had more. He said he believed 20 years developing technology and equipment was all for one purpose, and he thought they were close. He was supposed to get some information on Monday, but he didn't come through. Something about a key and a girl. I can't get close to XC Energy right now, but maybe you can. See if you can find out who they're looking for. If we find this person, we have a chance. Vox stood, looking past the glass door and into the crowd of people. I have to go. Take the back exit, through the kitchen. He was out the door before Jaren could take a breath. Before he could say yes or no or anything, He's crazy, Jaren said. With grief. Rachel tugged on his arm. Let's get out of here. Jaren tucked the manila envelope into the front of his pants, pulling his shirt down to cover it. They slipped out the back door of the cafe into an alley between two buildings. At the end of the alley, Jaren saw a bald man, smooth face, a small end of a triangle tattoo visible above his collar. Jaren grabbed Rachel and pulled her back against the wall. He kissed her. He didn't plan it, hadn't really thought it through, but his lips pressed against hers like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he wasn't doing this to look like a normal couple making out in the alley so the Triune would look past them. It was like this was the message he'd always wanted to send her. His kiss was real, passionate, and she returned it, wrapping her hands around his head as his fingers lifted her shirt, brushing against the skin of her back. You two. The voice was deep, flat. How long have you been here? Jaren didn't want to let go, didn't want to turn around. He pressed his head against hers for an instant, wondering for the first time what he would do if she wasn't there. She'd been his constant, his everything. He turned to face the man holding a pistol with a silencer on the end. Jaren raised his hands and stepped in front of Rachel. Whoa, no need for that. We'll find another spot. Did you see anyone else come out that door? Rachel pulled Jaren back and stepped forward so they stood side by side. The man moved the gun back and forth, like he was debating which one to take out first. No, sir. Just the two of us, and we've been here for a while. Rachel smiled as she ran a finger up Jaren's spine. If it wasn't for the gun in their face, Jaren would have given up his father's entire fortune to push her up against the wall again. If you need this spot, we'll leave. No worries. Sorry, the man said. Wrong place, wrong time. He kept the gun aimed at Jaren's chest. Rachel jumped in front just as they heard a dull thud. Jaren flinched before his mind registered that it wasn't the sound of a gun. The bald man's eyes went wide, his mouth dropping open as if in protest. Instead of words, a gurgling sound came out, followed by a red trickle of blood out of the corner of his mouth. He fell forward. Vox stood behind where the man fell. A pleased smile pulled his face into a maze of wrinkles. A crowbar jutted out of the man's back, the straight end penetrating the clothing and buried several inches into the ribs. The curved end of the bar still vibrated from the impact of the body. Jaren couldn't stop the question. A crowbar? Household tools are underappreciated. Vox brushed his hands against each other. They have a variety of uses. I don't know if a crowbar counts as a household tool. Rachel poked her toe against the guy's arm. No reaction, but it was effective. Vox walked them back to Rachel's car. I had a brother who thought he was a hero, always saving people, trying to get them to see a brighter future. I went into journalism, thinking I could make a difference by taking a different path than him. He taught me a lot, but now I'm out to prove I can be just as big a hero as him without all the special abilities. Make up for who I left behind when I ran. The Triune didn't kill your brother? Rachel asked, pulling her keys from her pocket. I'm sure he's on the top of their most wanted list, Vox said, with a huff for a laugh, but he's a hard one to kill. Vox handed Jaren a card with a number on it. You can call me there if you find out anything. Xander was going to get the information to me. Maybe he has it ready somewhere, and you just have to find it. He stepped back and disappeared into the crowd. They both climbed into the car, Jaren flipping the card between his fingers. That was some kiss. Rachel started the car and pulled onto the street. It almost felt serious. Jaren knew this was going to be hard, but he couldn't shake the image of a burning car with a woman and a baby trapped inside. You know I don't get serious. I thought it was a good cover story, making out in an alley. That's fair, Rachel said, keeping her eyes on the road. Just wanted to make sure. What time do you want to go to your dad's office? Not we, Jaren said. Just me. This is way too dangerous. I'm not some girl that needs to be protected. One of these days, you're going to realize you're the one who needs me. I've always needed you, Jaren said, his throat feeling tight. That's why I need you to back off. Stay away. This relationship is over. He turned, unable to look at her. He folded his arms and tried to imitate his dad's stance when he fired a client. Cold, aloof. Instead, he had to swallow hard and blink back the doubt. A sad half-smile lifted the corner of Rachel's mouth. She didn't argue. You have to promise me one thing. Technically, I don't have to promise anything. I just broke up with you. Rachel put a hand over his mouth as she pulled up to a stop sign. She leaned into him, the smell of her coconut lotion filling him with longing and a stabbing regret. "Promise me you won't go to your father's office alone."